We are going live. Now please mute your mic. Others, please mute your mic.
Dolly madam has come.
Yes. Let's start now. Let's start.
Start.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Respected esteemed guest speakers of the day, Dr. Ashwini Marathe and Mrs. Parubita Chakraborty, our principal, Dr. Asha Menon, our director, Dr. Kubudavali, respected managing trustees, principals of other colleges, the reputed officials of ICTA, participants, colleagues, and my dear friends. I, Dr. Madhumita Bandopadhyay, would like to welcome each and every one to this brainstorming national webinar on learning differences and different learning needs, organized by the IQAC of Srimati P.N. Doshi Women's College, Mumbai, in association with Bukta. It is time that we as teachers must learn how to cater to students of different types and understanding the learning techniques to be adopted for them. We are fortunate to have with us today Dr. Ashwini Marathe, a medical doctor, and Mrs. Parumita Chakraborty, a counselor, who will help us to understand how to understand the different types of learners and the strategies to be adopted to make learning effective for all types of learners. A warm welcome to our guests, Dr. Ashwini Marathe and Mrs. Parumita Chakraborty. In this auspicious occasion, let us light a lamp and begin our program. Before we get started, let us throw some light on the purpose of organizing this webinar. I would like to invite Mr. Meet Shinde to explicate the concept note of this webinar. Mr. Meet Shinde.
Thank you, Madhumita ma'am. Good afternoon and a warm welcome to everyone who has chosen to spend their weekend afternoon with us. It is indeed special for us that all of you all decided to join us for a deliberation on what we called learner differences and different learning needs. I, Mr. Meet from the Department of Psychology at SPND Women's College, would hereby take a minute or two to elucidate what we intended to accomplish in the next 1.5 hours of our session. Proverbial wisdom tells us that to think is to differ. And what better place to see this unfold than our classrooms? One of the things that makes our profession thrilling and enriching at the same time is the sheer diversity that our classrooms embody. It is this very diversity that shows us how learning comes in many different forms and how every student has a unique way of learning and different learning needs. It is important for all of us as facilitators to understand these differences so that we can implement best practice strategies into our curriculum, pedagogy, and assessments. This kind of an understanding becomes all the more pertinent in today's times, which is marked by a radical shift in everything that we understood as teaching and classrooms. The changes and challenges posed by the diversity in today's learners, whether in traditional or online classrooms, calls for teachers to reassess their philosophy, understanding, and methods to suit their new teaching and learning environment. In addition to this, the NAAC accreditation process also emphasizes that each institution should devise strategies for the progress of who they call slow and advanced learners. Hence, as a first step in this direction, the IQAC team at SPND Women's College decided to invite experts in this domain to shed some light on learner differences and different learning needs. The talk aims at outlining the various aspects of differences in learners which could impact their academic achievement. This is done so that we could collectively reflect on the aspects that we could consider at both an institutional level as well as an individual level to build our inclusive teaching practices. Without taking any more time, I'd like to hand this over to Madhumita ma'am so that we could move further in our session. Thank you.
Thank you, Meet. This was really a clear, objectives that were put up. Now, I would like to invite our dear principal, Dr. Asha Menon, to deliver the welcome address.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madhumita. Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to the national webinar on learner differences and different learning needs, organized by IQAC of Srimati P.N. Doshi Women's College, Mumbai. Before I say a few words about the webinar, I would like to mention few accomplishments of my college. Our institution is 60 years old. We have been recognized as one of the top performing institutes in the country from Maharashtra by NAAC in 2017. The vision of our institution is to educate, enlighten, and empower girls. The guidance and the vibrant learning atmosphere provided by us is important for our students. Well-qualified and dedicated teachers, excellent teaching and learning process, student support like mini lunch, clothes bank, and book bank, good governance, leadership and management, and best practices like IQAC and academic and administrative audit have helped us achieve what we have today. All these have culminated not only in getting high grades in NAAC, but also in fulfilling our vision to be recognized as a center of excellence for education that empowers women, leading to self-actualization. Coming back to today's webinar, we as teachers have faced the challenges of slow learners and advanced learners in our regular classroom. These type of learners are neither rare nor unique. They are the two ends of a spectrum. How does the teacher bridge this gap in the class so that both are motivated to be there? Are important concerns of any teacher. To keep these students actively engaged in the learning process requires more than the usual variation in presentation methods, classroom climate, and instructional materials. If this variation is not a part of the teacher's class, these students may not be interested in the class and disrupt the class. What does the teacher do to see that all the children are in the same learning platform? What more can the teacher do so that the advanced learners are stimulated to be in the class? Are all concerns that the teacher has. To understand about slow learners and advanced learners and how to deal with their specific needs, we have with us two eminent speakers, Dr. Ashwini Marathe from Ummeed Child Development Center. I'm happy to inform she has been a parent to a student, Aditi, of our college. And who better than Dr. Marathe as a parent is aware the support that we provide to our students. Welcome, ma'am. The second speaker for today is Mrs. Paramita Chakraborty, who is a certified play therapist and a child counselor. Who better than her to help us relate to the needs of slow learners and advanced learners. Welcome, ma'am, to this webinar. I would also like to welcome Dr. S. Kumdavali, Madam, Director, SPRJ K Trust, to this webinar, the propelling force behind us and a ready reckoner. Welcome, Madam. I would like to welcome all the principals present at the webinar and all the participants. I am told there are more than 100 participants from 28 states of India and a few participants from Canada too. We are happy to see such overwhelming response from the teachers. It shows your commitment towards bridging the gap in the class between slow learners and advanced learners. Wishing the webinar the very best. I congratulate the IQAC team for their commitment to work towards helping educational institutions to be inclusive. Thank you. Over to Dr. Madhumita Bandopadhyay.
Madhumita, you need to unmute, yeah.
I would like to welcome Dr. Siddiqui from Mukta to speak a few words. Dr. Siddiqui.
Unmute, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Good afternoon to one and all, and a warm welcome to all the participants from this program. Mumbai University and College Teachers Association, Mukta, is a registered association affiliated to Akhil Bharatiya Rashtriya Shaikshik Mahasangh, ABRSM, taking keen interest in the teachers' well-being since its inception. As per the objective of the association, Mukta conducted a massive awareness drive throughout affiliated colleges of Mumbai University under the leadership of Dr. Shekhar Chandratre as president and Dr. Namdev Mandge as general secretary. Now, under the dynamic and energetic leadership of Dr. Vaibhav Naravade as president and Professor Subhash Athole as general secretary, a lot of initiatives have been taken for teachers' training and welfare. Mukta has established various cells such as Teachers Education Cell, Teachers Grievance Cell, and recently a publication cell. Mukta has its presence on Facebook and Twitter as well. Besides, it has an informative and functional website, which is very useful to teachers community, and Mukta channel, wherein all the programs conducted by Mukta can be accessed once you subscribe the channel. During COVID-19 pandemic, when nation observed lockdown, Mukta provided a platform for teacher community to come together, share their knowledge and thoughts by holding several webinars. Mukta has extended and extending technical support to educational institutes to conduct online program, and many colleges and universities have organized webinars, workshops, and FDPs in association with Mukta. In the initial phase, starting from 4th of April, about 12 webinars were conducted by Mukta, but as on today, the total number of programs, which also includes FDPs, stands at more than 50, out of which 13 were conducted under Mukta banner, 32 in collaboration with various colleges, and 8 with different universities on important and innovative topics. All programs received overwhelming response from teachers across the country and abroad as well. Representatives from more than 100 Indian and foreign universities participated in various programs, and an average attendance of more than 2,000 was recorded. राष्ट्र के हित में शिक्षा, शिक्षा के हित में शिक्षक और शिक्षक के हित में समाज. With this tagline and intent, Mukta is looking forward for continuing support from various organization bodies and teacher community to expand its activities and render its services in future. Thank you. Back to Madhumita ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Siddiqui. Now we would begin the session, but before we begin the session, I would like to make 2 announcements. 1, whatever questions you have for the speaker or whatever comments you have, please post it to the Telegram group. 2, the feedback form will be shared with you at the end of the session. You have to fill up the feedback form in order to get your certificates. So now let us begin our session. We would start with the introduction of the first speaker, Dr. Ashwini Marathe. I therefore invite our Dr. Veena Shetty to introduce Dr. Ashwini Marathe.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to introduce our today's first speaker, Dr. Ashwini Marathe. She has done MBBS and MD Pediatrics, Diploma in Child Health from Mumbai University. She has received fellowship, Indian Academy of Pediatrics in Neurodevelopmental and Behavioral Pediatrics from Ummid Child Development Center, Mumbai. Currently, she is working as developmental pediatrician in Learning Disability Center, Learning Disability Clinic at Sion Hospital and Ummid Child Development Center, Mumbai. She has a keen interest in building capacity for holistic care in the space of childhood and adolescent development and disabilities. Ma'am has also presented many research papers and been a speaker on topics related to learning disorders and pediatrics nutrition in various forums. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us. I request you to start the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I'll just start my screen share. Good afternoon, everyone. And a big thanks for that introduction. And I would also like to start with thanking all the dignitaries of Srimati P.N. Doshi College and Mukta for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this forum. I must say it's an absolute pleasure and a privilege. I mean, like all of us, I am also at home and I really feel at home in this forum here with all of you all. So, I am here as a pediatrician, as a developmental pediatrician, and also as a parent of two young adults with different learning needs. And why I am sharing this here is because all these phases in my life, the pediatrician, being a developmental pediatrician and a parent, has helped me understand the various development and learning profiles, the differences in the development and learning profiles, for sure, and most importantly, the most crucial role that teachers play as mentors, as guides, as motivators and supporters to help all learners reach their optimum potential. I am also speaking this from my personal experience as a parent, in addition to my work in the field of development and disabilities. And a real acknowledgement and appreciation to all the teachers here for that role. Definitely, it's a big role to play and a big support to all. So, going ahead, I came across this quote and I would like to read it, that the capacity to learn is a gift, the ability to learn is a skill, and the willingness to learn is a choice. And I think, and we all know, that various learners may come with various gifts and abilities. And it is our role as the community of teachers, of parents, of healthcare workers to develop those skills so that they reach their potential, to develop the willingness by promoting interest and motivation, and ultimately towards inclusion. And I think we all are united in this goal, because I think this is evident based on the topic of today's discussion and the huge response it has received. I was less hearing the response it has received, and it's really heartwarming. So, going ahead with these goals in mind, and I will just sharing the objectives of my talk. I would be talking about understanding of the various learner differences, a sensitization towards that, identifying the strengths and challenges of individual learner profiles, some of the specific ones, and of course, the role and goal of support and strategies. My co-speaker would go ahead after me with the strategies and interventions. As we are talking about academic learning, learning is multifaceted. Here, as we talk about academic learning, let's think of a college assignment or a school assignment, and let's think that we have given, or you teachers have given an assignment to students. Maybe you all have explained the goal, the questions, the purpose, or the expectations. It may have been explained orally, it may have been explained in written, and maybe a time commitment may have been given. And then for this college assignment, it would be nice to think of the processes involved in completion of that for different students. And going ahead, so this sounds like a hardware of a computer, input, process, storage, and output. But it's not that. It's also a process in academic learning. And one small thing, that though this is linear, it's always interconnected. But for the interest of easy discussion, let us think what a learner will do. The learner will first have to focus on the input. That means he may hear the instructions of the teacher, or he may read it in whatever way they have been given, which is the input. Then this input has to be processed. That means the information has to be comprehended. Sometimes, and especially because we are talking about young adults, there is a lot of abstract reasoning which may have to be applied. By abstract reasoning, I mean that sometimes, or many times, or most of the times, the question may not have exactly what is to be done, and there may be some things beyond the question or beyond the stated concrete things which a learner may have to identify and work on it. As he is doing this, he is applying his sensory preferences or learning style preferences when he uses the input and the processing methods, and which may be different for different learners. As he is doing this, he's also applying his memory. So he's going back into his short-term memory, into his long-term memory, his or her, I mean, to get to know what is stored and what can be used. And as this is going on, then comes the output. That means whatever information has been retrieved from memory, abstract reasoning has been applied, and then there is organization of that information, in which important information will be kept, unimportant may have to be filtered out depending on the commitments or the deadlines. There may be planning involved all along, though I have written it here, and there may be sequencing ultimately for a presentation. A presentation which needs to be attractive, which needs to be relevant, and which needs to be on time. So this is the process which students apply in the cognitive domain of their learning, and the cognitive ability, the arrow at, below, it covers all of that. Again, this process also needs a sustained attention at all points, a focused attention at certain points, and the sustained attention may be for any period of time, whatever the time period has been told to the students. Now, this attention will again differ based on the interest, the motivation, the physical health, the mental well-being, and all that. So, maybe I talked a lot on this slide, but what I want to highlight is, with so many processes involved in one assignment or in all assignments or all outputs of learning, it is very obvious that there are going to be learner differences at each or at multiple points, like sensory differences about the learning inputs, vision and hearing, the learning styles. There may be medical differences and cognitive differences, also other neurodevelopmental differences. There may be differences in the psychosocial aspect, we'll talk about it, and differences in the interests, motivations, and abilities. So these are some or most of the learner differences, and there may be many more, but as we go ahead, we'll talk more into some of them. Now, in spite of these learner differences, and especially when we talk about academic learning, so we do know that in our society or in any institution, the academic progress or academic performance is based on the achievement in grades or achievement in tests or the achievement as per the age and grade expectations. So we will see that in spite of the many learner differences, we will see that in a classroom, there are many, significant many whose achievements or whose outputs, maybe we can think of the college assignments, and we will not think of only one point, but at multiple points. So the outputs or the academic performance may be mostly consistent with the age or grade expectations. And there may be some who will stand out. Why would they stand out? Because they are exceptional. So by exceptional, I mean some may be doing consistently and significantly above the age and grade expectations. So in this consistent and significant, both words are very important. And some may be doing consistently and significantly below the age and grade expectations of that class. So we see that though significant learners may keep up with the age and grade expectations, and here I am talking only about academic learning, but there may be some who may be doing above it, and there may be some who may be doing significantly below it. And let us talk about these differences, these learner differences, in a little more detail. So, talking about the students or the learners who are doing consistently below what is expected for their age and grade. And we will see, and we know that there are so many factors that support learning or may become barriers towards successful learning. Like there may be physical factors like chronic illnesses. There may be sensory difficulties like hearing and vision problems. There may be neurodevelopmental factors, we'll talk about it later, and emotional or psychological factors like interest and motivation. In addition, it is not only the learner, but also the environment around him, his home, his family support, the peer support or the peer influence, the influence or the support from the educational institute. That means the teaching learning experience. It can be availability of resources, availability of educational equipments. Then there are also psychosocial factors which may play a role for academic achievement or cause academic underachievement. For example, there may be first generation learners who may be limited in their support of learning at home. There may be learners with language difficulties. Their language of comfort and language of instruction may differ. There may be differences or difficulties in the socio-economic status, which ultimately may provide barriers to having adequate educational experiences or educational equipments and supportive educational surroundings. So the point in going over this is being sensitized towards various reasons why a student may not perform to the ability or to what is expected for his age or grade or his potential. And going ahead and keeping this in mind, because this will apply, so none of this may be only all or none or only one. There may be a multitude of factors and a play of factors, which is important. So it's important to keep this in mind. And with this in mind, if I go ahead to about certain specific reasons and a mention about hearing and vision status only because it is important. If you remember that input, the process of learning, the first point is input. So that means the input of any information will be heard or will be seen. And it is very important to ascertain a normal hearing and vision status, especially because there are quite a few hearing or vision difficulties which may not have been picked up earlier or which may not have been there earlier and have surfaced now. So it is just important to keep it in mind that this is these hearing and vision status has to be ascertained or confirmed. Then there are differences like which are on the cognitive processes or neurodevelopment, like borderline intellectual functioning, specific learning disorders, and ADHD or attention deficit hyperactive disorders. Now, talking about the first one. So when we talk about academic underachievement and when we have ruled out the multiple, most of the other things which I had put up on my list before, and we know the thing that the terminology that comes to our mind is a slow learner. We have in our mind an idea of what a slow learner is, or we think that he might be a slow learner or this individual is a slow learner when the academic achievement is consistently and significantly below what is expected. However, here I would like to take a minute and I would request everyone to focus here that slow learner is not a diagnostic category anymore. It was there some years back. I will definitely talk about what I mean by this. When I mean that it is not a diagnostic category, the name is not a diagnostic category because the term here is unintentional and it is more respectful to speak of such children as having diverse minds and to speak of such children not limiting them by any IQ scores but limiting or helping them with their abilities. So what I mean is when we talk about the terminology of slow learners, and there have been various definitions of slow learners in literature, we know that a person or a learner who has difficulties in meeting the minimum academic requirements for that age or grade, who lags behind in addition to academics in social, emotional, as well as psychological factors. His intelligence level is in the low average or borderline IQ range. And so that means the IQ range, if I talk about the IQ here, because it's mentioned in a definition, not now, but in a definition which was used before, that the IQ range of 70 to 85. This child or this individual is often ignored by others as dull, lazy, not interested in studies. He is either ignored or ridiculed. It is seen that it doesn't help him at all when he fails repeatedly in examinations, and it is possible that they finally become school dropouts. It is seen that looking at all this, and when we talk about the low average intelligence or the borderline intelligence range, these children or these individuals come under borderline intellectual functioning, which is the terminology which we use now and which I would like to explain a little further later. Slow learner is sometimes an umbrella term which is also used for all individuals who have difficulties in learning, all students or learners who have difficulties in learning. So before we talk about borderline intellectual functioning, it is important to go into all the reasons which we mentioned before. We talked about intelligence and we talked about low average intelligence. So let me just talk about this slide in a minute. And on this slide at the top, we see the IQ score distribution, and you are quite familiar with that. And what we are doing right now is trying to correlate this IQ curve and correlate this continuum of intelligence below. So Dr. Menon just talked about a spectrum, and I really second that. I really connected to that, because intelligence is a spectrum. It is a continuum. It is dynamic and multidimensional, and it can't be limited by a number. And because intelligence can't be limited by a number, no definition or no label can be limited by a number. So when we talk about slow learners, or we talk about borderline intellectual functioning, which is the terminology to be used ideally, we know that these are the children whose intellectual capacities fall into the low average range. And because of these difficulties in intellectual capacities and adaptive capacities, that is the primary reason for their academic difficulties. So the purple area here on the IQ curve is the average, low average intellectual capacity, below which I have written borderline intelligence. There are other learners like learning disorders, specific learning disorders, who may be in the average range of intellectual performance, and there are others, and there are some others who are also exceptional and fall in this blue range to the right, I mean in the higher average range of intellectual performance. So knowing the intelligence being a spectrum and a continuum, we identify this low average range of intellectual performance and high average range of intellectual performance. But what is important here, that the upper IQ score distribution picture or diagram has very demarcated colors, and intelligence can't be demarcated like that. When we talk about continuum or a spectrum, it is a continuous influx or a continuous spread of colors which we see below. By that I mean that it is not fair, or it is not the current research does not support the terminology or the understanding that the IQ numbers, that is 70 to 85, being the diagnostic categories for borderline intelligence. And if someone is 84, so he is having borderline intelligence, and someone having 88 does not have borderline intelligence. So that doesn't make sense, because it is a continuum, and it is not only intelligence but also the nurturing factors which add and play a role in it. So what I mean is, a borderline intelligent learner fall in the low range of intellectual potential, though it is not fair to limit them by a number. The range is of course there, but the numbers, IQ, IQ is a very standardized and validated test, but that is not the only test to label them as borderline intelligent functions. So going ahead with a little about that, as our topic of today is slow learners, and we have focused on the point that the current terminology for that, after ruling out most of the other difficulties that may cause learning, is borderline intellectual functioning. By that I mean these children have difficulties in intellectual functioning. It is in the low average range. So in what will they have a difficulty? They will surely have a difficulty in academic learning. They will have a difficulty in learning from experience. Intellectual functioning, if we go on the diagram in the at the start, we know that other cognitive processes were planning, reasoning, problem solving, abstract thinking, memory, and these children have difficulties in all of that. In addition, they also have difficulties in some of the adaptive skills, not to the extent of a person with intellectual disability, but definitely difficulties in age-appropriate social behaviors, age-appropriate communication. They can't learn from the surroundings and can't learn from the experience. Hence, these difficulties present as these learners are slow to work and respond in all tasks, academic as well as non-academic. because their processing is delayed. That is, making sense of the information comes slow for them. They take time in that. Their difficulty in reasoning, abstract thinking, a generalization, organization, and memory, and and also multitasking also hinders their performance. So we already talked about abstract thinking. It is very difficult for children with borderline intellectual functioning to understand a task or a concept or a question if it is not presented in a concrete manner, it is not presented in a black and white manner, they may miss the point. Another thing, generalization is a concept which comes very easily to a person with average intellectual functioning, so easily that we don't even think about it. So what is generalization? Generalization is our ability to apply what we have learned in one context to some other context without even thinking about it. So if I have learned about a sum or about some concept in one subject, I would be effortlessly applying it to any part of my daily living activities or any part of some other subjects. But this is difficult for children with borderline intellectual functioning. So if we assume that this has been taught in one subject, it doesn't necessarily mean that the similar concept in a different, similar way, almost similar way in other subject may be easy for them to grasp. That doesn't happen. So like I said, they do better with concrete information, which is presented in short steps, in simple language, and in point forms. Their language and behavior is immature, and their relationships also, that's why, are immature. They may not understand jokes, they may be ridiculed, made fun of, and they may not know how to respond. They don't come across as a smart aleck or giving smart retorts. This leads to them being very quiet. They, of course, have a poor self-image and a poor self-confidence because of that. Their creativity and curiosity may be less than average. And we talked about their difficulty, that they have difficulties in academic learning because of the above problems, or the cognitive problems, and also they have difficulty in learning from experience. Hence, it is seen that their general knowledge or world exposure is also very low. This general knowledge of world exposure is something we may not always teach students, but it is sort of picked up from what is going on around us. And this is something which a person with borderline intellectual functioning may find difficult. Beyond academics, I thought I should talk about this because it is the focus of our topic today, that children or individuals with borderline intellectual functioning are more prone to mental health issues because they have inadequate coping skills. There are so many unsupported challenges they are present with. These challenges may often go unnoticed too, and especially in this current society when there are many demands in academic work and social. And these mental health challenges may present as, of course, school dropping out, anxiety, low self-confidence we already talked about, and even as depression, suicide, substance abuse, and antisocial personality disorders. Relationships have been reported in literature. There are lifelong drawbacks in social and vocational opportunities and health outcomes, and that's why very important to support them right from an early age and identify the difficulties, not only academic but all these others too, in terms of mental health support, and support them as needed. So this was about slow learners, the academic difficulties, and some challenges beyond academics. And why I talked about these challenges beyond academics is also because we are talking about academic achievements or academic performance. But after all, the individual has multiple facets and all have an interplay with each other. And talking purely from the academic viewpoint, also the other challenges in mental health will have an influence on the academic performance, and the person as a whole has to be supported for sure. So after talking about borderline intellectual functioning, which was initially called slow learner, and we discussed about that in great detail, there are some learners who may have learning disability, or in the previous days it used to be called, and even now it is commonly called as LD, or dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. It is possible that some of the institutions may have students, and it is very likely, I mean, they will of course have students who have specific learning disorders. So these students have academic difficulties. Their academic difficulties are in specific areas, and it is interesting, you will see that similar difficulties in the cognitive processing are there, like language, planning, memory, organization. They have similar difficulties. However, their non-academic domains or adaptive domains are not a problem. It is not a challenge. Why? Because their intellectual functioning is in the average range. So they present mostly with pure academic difficulties. These academic difficulties, like I said, are not because of difficulties or challenges in intellectual functioning. And they're not because of any hearing or vision problems, any emotional disturbances, environmental disadvantages, or economic disadvantages. By that I mean that academic difficulties only in specific areas without any adaptive or non-academic difficulties, and because of the psychological processes involved in learning, are the reasons for specific learning disorder, or LD, which as we commonly call. This is one more neurodevelopmental difference which we may often see in our classrooms, and sometimes we are aware of it. Many times it may not be noticed because people or parents think that now the child has grown up and now attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD, it was a thing of the past, it was of childhood. Now this child doesn't run around, idhar udhar kutta nahi hai, so now don't need to worry about that. And it happens that this history may not be given also. But it is important to give a minute to this slide, because there are children with ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and the name tells us that they have difficulties in sustaining or paying attention and hyperactive behavior. As they grow up into adolescents, young adults, and adults, the hyperactive behavior may go down for sure. Some restlessness may remain, but the difficulty in focusing and sustaining attention remains. So they make silly mistakes. It is seen that they often daydream in the class. There are difficulties in specific executive functioning. Like these students you may find that they grasp something, they answer intelligently when they are paying attention, and they may even commit to something, but they have difficulties in meeting up deadlines. They may know that they have to give a project, but they may not give it on time. They have difficulty in organization. So they know a lot of things, but it is possible that they won't be able to organize their thoughts and present a topic. Organization is also organization of books, notes, and materials. So they may be sloppy, they may be messy, they may lose things. Time management is also organization, so they often don't meet deadlines. Most important thing is, because they are, though not hyperactive, most of them, they are restless. There is internal restlessness and impulsivity. They interrupt others, which may be annoying. But more than that, this impulse control behavior not working to its optimum or not maturing even after they are adults or young adults, they are very prone to risk-taking behavior and substance abuse. So by risk-taking behavior, and this is important to focus here for teachers who are dealing with young adults. So risk-taking behaviors may be seen very commonly in these students. They may break rules, they may not be bothered by any reprimands, or they may not be bothered by the consequences. They may not think of the consequences. The abstract reasoning part may not work, and so they may get into fights, they may get into antisocial behaviors and substance abuse, because they have the impulsivity and they don't know how to control that impulse. Of course, there are comorbidities like associated anxiety and oppositional behaviors, which may also play in their have a role to play in their functioning. So if we come to that slide again, we see that though we talked about 3 types of learners, the learners who learned at a slow pace of learning because they had borderline intellectual functioning, learners with learning disability, and learners with ADHD. But we saw that most of the processes in academic learning, which were challenges for them, were similar. The difference is it is not a very black and white or core cut difference, but it is usually seen that a person with borderline intellectual functioning or a low average intellectual functioning will have difficulties at all points of the processes and slowness at all points of the processes. While it is possible that a person or individual with learning disorder may have specific areas which may be discrepant. He may be good at certain things of this flow, and he may have difficulties with maybe comprehension or organization. And while a ADHD child or individual may have more difficulties in sequencing, organization, meeting deadlines, planning, and the functions related to that. However, it is important to mention here that again, this is also not black and white, and there may be a multitude of factors because all these factors are in fact connected to each other. So we talking about the continuum of intelligence and not getting the IQ picture here because we already talked about it. And we have an idea that in the center of intelligence, I mean the average band of intelligence, and there is a borderline intelligence that is the low average, maybe one standard deviation beyond the normal, below the normal. There are children or individuals with borderline intelligence. In the average band are specific learning disorders, and ADHD may be there either here or on the other side too. And there are individuals who now fall at the other end of the spectrum. These are, so they fall in the high average or maybe one or two standard deviations towards the right, towards the other side of the normal. And these children with high intellectual abilities and certain other capabilities too fall under advanced learners or gifted learners. So here it is not, I'm just showing this continuum here only to show that it is not only the IQ score which will measure that, but there are a variety of factors which come into the play. And we know that with very high intellectual abilities more than one or two standard deviations are ones who are advanced and gifted learners. So then if we don't consider IQ as the only score or only way to identify these, what do we do? What do we do to identify? We already talked about borderline intelligence and learning disorders. Well, how do we identify advanced learners? So there are some terminologies, and that sometimes these terminologies are used interchangeably. And so we have heard about gifted and talented learners. Now, there is no universally accepted definition of giftedness. Basically, gifted learners or talented learners mean they have a high performance capacity in intellectual, creative, artistic, or leadership skills in specific fields, specific academic fields too, and they require services which are not ordinarily provided by educational institutions to fully develop such capacities. So this is one definition of gifted and talented learners. And though there is no universally accepted single definition, there is definitely a broad consensus that giftedness can't be solely defined by an IQ score. And we are going to talk about advanced learners. So what is the difference between gifted learners and advanced learners? And again, there may not be a clear-cut difference, but I read up about in literature, and literature supports the use of advanced learner as a terminology for those students who do demonstrate their need for greater academic challenges. However, they may not be formally identified as gifted for various reasons. For reasons of the institutions, because maybe they have not been tested, because IQ is not the only criteria. There was never a need to test everything. So they are not formally identified. They have not been given the diagnosis of gifted, but they definitely demonstrate their need for greater academic challenges. And that is important because that is where we need to support them. And how do they demonstrate this need for greater academic challenges, and how do we identify them? So for identifying advanced learners, and we already know that they are on the higher end of intellectual spectrum. So for identifying them, we go into three broad categories. So they may have their thinking, their learning, their behavioral patterns, some specific points in three broad categories. We talked about the intellectual ability, then they have a high degree of creativity and they have heightened sensibilities or sensitivities. So going into the first point, we already know that the intellectual processes which are involved, we went over it. So they are very good at reasoning, their abstract thinking, generalization, memory, organization. They are very good at multitasking. They can grasp new concepts very easily. And hence, their academic achievement is very high most of the times. They're advanced readers and their language and behavior too is mature. They usually like to work independently at their own pace. And of course, I talked about multitasking. It is seen that learners with advanced intellectual abilities are usually highly focused and they're focused with great intensity, especially in the areas of their interests. And their areas of interest may be varied. They may even be concerned with abstract, moral, philosophical questions, questions which may not be there in the curriculum and which may be there in the curriculum, but then their breadth and depth of going into that question will be more than what is expected for their age and grade. So this was about the intellectual ability. It is also seen that they have a high creative ability. So they are curious. There is a lot of reasoning going on. They ask questions and they may not be satisfied with the answers. They question the answers too. And their thinking may be different and abstract. The elaboration or discussion on ideas are unusual. Their interests or hobbies may be unusual. They would like to experiment. Their thinking is critical. Their imagination is vivid and they may show their creativity in various things. So creativity can be in drawing, writing, building something, singing, even wordplay, even literature. And it is seen that with this high creative ability, most of them are not very comfortable with what's routine or what's predictable. In addition to having high intellectual abilities and high creativities, sensibility is also heightened. By that I mean that usually intense emotional extremes are seen. Why? Because they are sensitive, they are perfectionists themselves, and they do not like or usually can't tolerate imperfection in others. So this leads to irritability. Another thing, because they are very focused in areas of their interest, they don't very easily adapt to being deviated away from that area, and this again may present as irritability. They have a heightened sense of responsibility and maybe they have some expectations. They know that they have this expectation, or I do well in exams and I have to do it, or give my best in this too, or I have to prove myself. So they set goals for themselves, high goals for themselves, and if they don't achieve them, they can't accept that very easily. They can't accept criticism very easily. They're very sensitive to criticism. It is possible that especially in young adulthood or even in children, it is very important for them to be a part of the peer group or a part of a group. And because of their differences or their difference in their preferences, it is possible that they may not fit in the group. And so there may be loneliness. There may be stress and anxiety because of reasons I already talked about. They may seem to be disorganized and inattentive because they are very preoccupied with their area of interest. So when I talked about high intellectual ability, high creative ability, and heightened sensibility in a learner who demonstrates the need for higher academic input or higher or advanced support, which is not usually provided for most of the learners, these are the characteristics, common characteristics of advanced learners. It is not so that each characteristic will be present in each learner. There will be obviously differences, but these are certain things which are commonly observed in these learners. Similarly, with borderline intellectual functioning individuals, all the pointers may not be there, but most of those may be satisfied. So we talked about learner differences. We talked in very short about the intrinsic and extrinsic factors which may cause difficulties in learning. We talked about certain neurodevelopmental conditions, of which borderline intellectual functioning was one. advanced learners was one, because we went along the intelligence spectrum of intelligence, and we also talked about learning disorders which were in the average range of intelligence and ADHD. But how do we identify these? So in identification, there are 2 points: identification of the differences as well as identification of the supports needed or the levels of support needed. And for this, I think all of us, we all being teachers, informal educational assessment, I would like to talk about first. And I am not the expert here, but just going over this, that informal educational assessment is basically to understand the current level of functioning, the skills, abilities, and preparedness of the students, and to make the adaptations necessary. And for this, only one test or only one grade will not help, but multiple means like consultations with parents, previous teachers, peer sharing, consultations with peers. By consultations, I mean discussions informally. Even direct observations and observers report. There may be work portfolios, anecdotal records. These portfolios may be of academic work as well as non-academic work. There may be grades and notes. These are for all learners, for any kind of learners. And then there are charts and checklists. Different institutions can have different checklists or may have different checklists based on the goal of the education, the curriculum of the education. And there are checklists for the learners too. For example, there is a KWL checklist. So that is what I know, what I want to learn, and what I learned. So especially, for example, an advanced learner is encouraged to fill this checklist, because when he starts on a project or starts on a learning assignment, he can write down what I know, what I would like to learn. And at the end, after a small period, he can go over it and see what he learned, and he can form his next goal. So there are multiple means of assessment. A single assessment is not the criteria to plan adaptations, definitely. In addition to getting information from teachers, getting information about the family history, family relation, psychosocial factors is also important, about the medical history. And of course, finally, there is also IQ and educational assessment, though not always indicated. So it is not like all these things have to be done, but to make the list complete, I will also talk about IQ and formal educational assessment. And to end or to conclude, we know that there are varied learners. We talked about how to identify them. However, just like intelligence is a continuum, and that's why only an IQ score isolated will not help, learning is also a continuum. And how is learning a continuum? Because learning depends not only on the learner, and it is always dynamic and progressing based on the risk factors in the learner and in the environment, and the supportive factors which we get. And the learning trajectory can be progressed, leading to functionality, how the child progresses according to his potential, and promoting inclusion. The learning trajectory can be progressed to reaching his potential by reducing the risk factors and working on increasing the supportive factors. And I think this is a good point to end, as I would like to now hand over to my colleague, my co-speaker, as she's going to talk about these in details, the supportive factors, the strategies, and how we can develop or help in progression of the learning trajectory of the learner. Thank you. Hello.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwini. I should congratulate you. Your lecture was very, very engrossing, enlightening, and at the same time, very, very enjoyable. You talked about the learning differences. You talked about how to identify them, the factors that led to the different types of learning disabilities, and also the advanced learners, the characteristics, and also how to attend to them. It was an extremely well planned lecture. I really congratulate you. Now we would like to go to the next speaker, Mrs. Parumita Chakraborty. So I invite Mrs. Parumita Chakraborty, but before that, I would invite Dr. Veena Shetye to introduce our next speaker, Mrs. Parumita Chakraborty.
Thank you, Madhumita ma'am. Good evening, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mrs. Parumita Chakraborty. She has completed her postgraduate diploma in counseling from TISS. She is certified play therapist and child counselor. She did her internship as a counselor with the Saheli Sangh for the sex workers and their children. She also worked as HR assistant in managing and executing end-to-end recruitment process for managerial level at Infosys Technologies, Bangalore. Ma'am had participated in many national game opening ceremonies at Pune and also acted in a play that was declared as Best Play in Work 99. Her main aim is to work and help for children to achieve their goal and empower them to be independent and confident at their individual satisfaction and fulfillment. Currently, ma'am is working as an academic counselor with the Orbis School, Mandwa, Pune. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining with us today. Here I request you to conduct the session. Over to you, ma'am. Paromita, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you to everyone. Thanks to everyone. So Ashwini ma'am has shared a lot of knowledge. Now here I am here to share with you the rest of the. Can you hear me, all of you? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, but
Okay.
yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, so here we are here to share the next part of it, the strategies, and how do we deal with the children, and how do we manage our classrooms. So most of the time we have to say, like, there are no bad kids, only happy little classroom challenges. Yes, so let us go with the objectives. So most of the objectives here is challenges for teachers, types of learning, classroom strategies for slow learners and advanced learners, and what are the do's and don'ts that as a teacher we have to follow. Now,
Paromita, excuse me, you've not shared your screen, ma'am.
okay, didn't I? Okay,
Please share your screen, ma'am.
yeah, just a minute. Yeah, can you see it now? Can everyone see it? Okay.
Yes, ma'am,
So,
it's visible.
yeah, so let's go to the previous slide then. Yeah. Yeah, so there are no bad kids, only happy little classroom challenges. So the objective is here is the challenges for teachers, types of learning, classroom strategies for advanced and slow learners, do's and don'ts that we do for the students. Now, the biggest challenges that most of the teachers face today is lack of time. We try our level best, to work, but we have so many other challenges. We have to complete our syllabus, and with that, the extracurricular activities. Then, lot of paperwork. We need to document everything that we do. Performance pressure from administration, and the last but not the least, balancing diverse learning needs. So here we go. So for you, as teachers, when you enter the class, you find a set of children who are very naughty, but they can, they just grasp it immediately. They understand what you speak. They, ask you challenging questions. They want challenges. And the other set of children who just do not understand what you're speaking or what you're explaining. Even when you're trying to explain, you just do not. And there is another set of children who are the average, who understand, who comply, who listen to you, do their work sincerely. But today we are here to understand that it's not that children don't understand you because they are slow learners or advanced learners or any of that, or learning disability. It also could be because of the learning types. We all have a different learning types. So the 4 usual learning types are audio, visual, kinesthetic, read and write. When in the olden times, it was more of audio. We used to listen. than we didn't have so much of visual and kinesthetic. We didn't go to the laboratory so much doing our experimenting. But of course nowadays we do use all of them. Audios are the ones who need to listen, so they would not prefer a long distance course wherein you have to study on your own, like where you have to read and write. They want someone to speak to them, someone to explain the topics to them. The visuals are the ones who need to see different pictures, videos, films, and that helps them to understand. The kinesthetic are the ones who need to experiment, who need to do it by themselves. And the read and the write is the easiest of all. They are the ones who who just don't need a lot of support from the teachers also. They just need to read and write. But most of the time, many of the times, you will find a mixture of all. Some people are good at audio and they need audio and visual. Some students, they need visual kinesthetic. So it is a mixture of all. It's just not only one learning type when someone follows.
Parubita ma'am, I'm sorry to interfere. We can't see your face clearly, ma'am. Can you just yes? Can you adjust so that yes?
Yeah. Now can you see me?
Yes, a little bit. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. So most of the time we use all these learning types and we try to use it in our classroom. Nowadays, teachers use everything so that they can explain a concept to the students. But what happens is there are some students who do not understand. As Dr. Ashwini already explained it to you, that there are certain students whom we consider as slow learners, who have academic difficulties, who do not understand what is being taught. So there are certain strategies that we could use for them. The first one is compensatory. Now, what is compensatory learning? That is instructional approach that alters the presentation to control and avoid the student's fundamental weakness or deficiency. That is, you give a different way. Like for example, it's just not the word. You give a visual this also. You give you show a picture with it, or you have more of group discussions and include them in the group discussions, or you show them videos, or you show them you use a lot of videos and audios. So you use a lot of graphs so that they understand it better, so that they can those fundamental weaknesses that they had, they can work on that and they can understand the topic better. And the second one is remedial teaching. I'm sure in my school they use a lot of remedial teaching. Most of the teachers come early to teach. They take remedial classes. It's nothing but a technique and practice to eliminate weaknesses or reduce or eliminate by reteaching the context that are not learned earlier. That is, you drill and you practice and you make them practice so that they understand it. Now, these were the strategies. Now, what are the instructional strategies for students with students having academic difficulties? Now, most of the times these children do not understand what you have been taught. Like as we said, that the characteristics of slow learners are what? They have very low attention span. Second thing is they have a deficiency on basic skills. So they don't understand certain basic skills, and difficulty in comprehending abstract ideas, and they are very unsystematic and careless. So what we do is we have some instructional strategies for these students, and you can also use them in your classroom while you're teaching the other students, right? So the first thing that you have to do is develop lessons that incorporate students' interests, needs, and experiences. Now, what is this like? What do we do with this? Now, we have to realize that they have a very slow attention span. So you have to, make the class very interesting. So you have to develop a lesson plan in such a way that, they can get involved. So you try to put in those things which will interest them. Maybe make them draw or ask them questions, something which will get them involved. So you incorporate it according to their needs. So I know it is a little difficult, but sometimes we need to do that for the students. Then frequently vary your instructional techniques. As I said, their attention span is low. So what you do is keep changing your instructional techniques. For example, now you're explaining something, then question them. So what was it that I explained? What was it that I explained? So can you tell? Involve them in that, or have a group discussion and involve these children. Involve these children having academic difficulties. What happens is they feel wanted. Firstly, their confidence is very low. They have a very low self-esteem. So they feel a part. They don't feel that, okay, I am, most of the time they are, so they hardly socialize. They're considered to be introverts. So they feel a part of the group. So this really, motivates them to study. Then incorporate individualized learning material. So make a special note, make the whole chapter very easy for them. Maybe write notes for them, or you can ask one of her or his friends to teach them. So that helps them to work. Then the other one is incorporate audio and visual materials. So it's just as we said that they are they just cannot understand in one way. So most of the time slow learners are visual learners also. So try to incorporate audio and visual, so they can understand it and they can learn the whole technique better. Develop your own worksheet and exercises. As I already said before, that their standards, or they have a weakness. Their basic skills are not developed. So make a worksheet which is a little lower standard than the other students. So what happens is with these children, their confidence increase, and not alone that, they feel happy that they could work on it. And this usually happens in the remedial classes. In the remedial classes, we go to a standard which is a little lower than the standard they are. As we do an informal test, we find out the standard of the child, where the child stands, and if the standard of the child is somewhere of class 4 and the child is from class 6, we stamp the remedial from class 3, so that we've developed also their confidence. Provide peer tutors for students needing remediation. So this is another way. Maybe you have a friend of hers or his the student's friend who can help the student to work on it. Sometimes especially happens in lower classes, we usually put a peer, or a peer for a child who cannot write. So she will tell, okay, you write this fast, then we will play. The peer tutors also keep motivating. So that really helps them to work faster. And in colleges especially, you can always ask your peer tutors to make notes, help them to make notes, or help them to understand certain concepts which you could not. Which they could not understand. Encourage oral expression instead of written reports. As we said, they are academically not very good, so their writing skills are not very developed. So what happens is, it would instead of giving them a lot of written work, we could make their instead of asking them to write everything, we can ask them their assessments, to say their assignments, which are internal assignments. We could ask ask them to use a lot of oral expression, or orally they could give their assignments than the written reports, because that helps them to feel more confident. Provide study aids before the test. They don't understand what is important, what is not important. So it is just a hint, you can give it to you can tell the students, what, I feel you could study these topics, and these are really important, and I think that will help you. So provide a study aids before test, and teach learning skills. This is one more thing that we need to do with the students. They don't understand it. They don't understand how to study. They don't know how to study. So we could tell them, you could repeat. You can repeat and write and read, because they need a lot of repetition. And because they're not organized, you could ask them to make mind maps. so that, they can work hard, they can make mind maps and they can work on it because they are not organized. So this is something these are certain techniques that we can give the students so that, they work on, they can get better, they can do academically better. Now, there are certain do's and don'ts with students with academic difficulties. One is use visual. As I said, the visual learning helps them. So use a lot of visuals, show them videos, show them pictures, show them graphs. It really helps them. Use other interactive strategies like, have group discussions, questioning. So they will be in the class. Do target interaction and participation goals. Because they do not participate, because firstly they get distracted, and secondly they are not confident enough to participate. So, just try to pull them into the discussion. Try to, ask them, or give them that importance. Do provide an extra copy of material or pieces to interact with them. Give them extra notes, or make them, call them and, speak to them, understand what they need, and, try to help them out. Offer training to teachers for dealing with students having academic difficulty. This is one of the things which, I always feel the teachers need. One is the training that the teachers should have, because sometimes teachers get really frustrated because they don't know how to deal with it. And don't try not to make them sit on the last bench, because they get distracted. Try to make them sit on the first bench. Give them a lot of importance. Do not bully or humiliate the child. This we do very often with these children. We bully, we humiliate, and because they have a very low self-esteem, because they have a lot of other emotional problems, they don't even know how to answer it. So what happens is, when you bully and humiliate, they stop coming to your class. They don't come, and it's a negative vicious circle. They stop studying your subject and they get bad marks. And we keep complaining that these children are not working, these children are not studying. We don't realize that even we are at fault. We are the ones who are bullying them and humiliate them. And most of the teachers, we teachers do it unknowingly, because it's somewhere, we have an expectation. Why are they not? Because you are working very hard to, explain those concepts, and when they are not understanding, we have a tendency to bully or humiliate a child. Do not assume the student cannot participate. We often say that, okay, this child will not participate, or this child, whenever there's a competition, we look out for the bright children. We, make them participate. We want them to speak, because we want to show the administration how well I have taught, or how good I am at. I think we have to give chances to those students also who we think or we feel are not doing well academically. That also helps them to boost their confidence. Later on, later on in their life, one day, you will help a step, you will help them to grow a little, you will help them to build up their confidence. Now, this was slow learners. Now comes to advanced learners. Like, of course, they are a boon and a bane. Of course, they are very good. Of course, they are very good with everything. They are very, they understand. They are very quick in their work. They are, very creative. But they also have a lot of, negative behavior. That is, they get bored easily. Then they neglect other responsibilities. They try to bully friends. They are very egoistic. They impolitely correct adults. And when they impolitely correct us, we feel get very angry. How dare you? But we have to realize that they are just trying to they because they understand, or they can but they can think better. They just don't realize that they are doing it. So these are certain negative points in gifted children or advanced learners. So some of these strategies is enrichment. So what is enrichment? Enrichment is nothing but, you give them a more challenging assignment. Like instead of asking them to work on, so like especially for maths teachers, we have the A section, B section, D section. Instead of asking them to work on the A and the B, give them more challenging sums, or give them more challenging work. or give them more research oriented work, so that they feel they work better. Because the moment you give them the normal assignment, they will avoid it, because they already know they don't like to be drilled, they don't like to be doing the same thing again and again. Acceleration is this hardly happens, but most of the time you can always promote them, like a double promotion, or you can give them more, put them into the next class without an examination, so that helps them. So that is easier for the advanced learner. Of course, that depends on the authority. And self-paced is, you ask them or you advise them to do extra courses, or there are certain universities, they may you, instead of 4 sets of subjects, they can offer the 5th subject, an additional subject. Or there are certain boards which have this additional maths or additional subject, which helps them, which is more challenging for them. Now, instructional strategies for advanced learner: offer the most difficult first. Never ask them to start from the basics, because they already know the basics, so they want something challenging all the time. So the first thing is, give them the difficult first, so that then that creates an interest, and then they start working. Then pre-test for volunteers. We can do this in the class. What we could do is, once we teach a concept, we can take a test on a certain thing, on that subject, and we can give very difficult questions to the whole class, and we tell the class that whoever achieves more than 90% may not do the assignment. So what happens is, it becomes challenges for these advanced learners, and they start working hard. Prepare to take test challenges, prepare to take challenge, give them a lot of assignments which are a little more difficult, maybe a research, or maybe a little difficult from the class. Like, for example, if the child is in class 9, you start giving, and they are doing some maths problem, so give them a more difficult sum from the next class, maybe class 10. So let them take those challenges. Another thing is, speak to the students. Speak like building a rapport. In fact, whether it is a slow learner, an advanced learner, or a mediocre, I think building a rapport is the most important part. You exactly know what strategies to use. It just comes instinctively. So first, I even understand what they want. Many a times, as my experiences, I have seen there are certain children in my school who are really gifted. They have got such good concepts. They keep talking about different concepts like spaceship and universe and going to the moon. So once you speak about that, you can also give them assignments regarding that. So what happens is, that also creates interest, and they also start working in the class. Enable gifted students to work together. As I say, these children, they have a superiority complex. They do not want to work with everyone. They think that they want to monopolize. So put them in groups, make them work in groups. Don't make them the leader in the group, because what happens is, they'll monopolize. So what happens is, you make them a part of the group and let them work on it. So they will learn to stay in a group. They will learn to work in a group. Plan for tired learning. Like, you just don't plan for what is here, what you're teaching, for a higher standard, because they need those challenges. Without those challenges, they would never like to study. And when they get bored, they distract the class, they irritate their peers, they do everything so that you cannot take the class. They'll ask you the silliest of the questions, which you will get irritated with. But it is not it's not the problem with the child. It's actually our problem. We have to challenge him in such a way that he keeps thinking something, and he doesn't try to distract the class. Do's and don'ts with the advanced learner in classroom. So the do's are, advanced learners also come to learn and be challenged. So finding their strengths and weaknesses is important, and also addressing their weaknesses are important. As Shrini ma'am already told, they don't like being criticized. But criticism is a part of growth. Without criticism, you cannot grow, right? So it is very important that you tell their weaknesses, because they are also coming to, most of the time we Indians or most of us, we have this mindset that if the child is good in studies, they can do anything. That's not the case. Behavior is one of the biggest issues. I keep telling it. It's the life skills that keep us going in life. It's just not the concepts of physics and chemistry. It's the life skills. So it is very important. It's just not the concepts. It's also the life skills that we have to teach these children. Use phrases like you don't need more practice, or you need more practice, instead of words like qualify or eligible while referring to extension work. For example, you give them a difficult task and they do it well, or they don't do it well. So instead of saying, wow, you have done, you're eligible for the next work, instead of saying that, what we do is we say that, okay, that's really good, but then you need a little more practice, or okay, you have done for today, so you don't need a practice. So that doesn't create a lot of superiority complex in them. Try to give more challenging assignments, because they get used to getting good grades, and they may be risk averse. So most of the time what happens is these advanced learners, they love challenges. They love to take challenges because they're achievers. But it's like a human tendency. When you are not used to something, you try to evade it. So the same thing, these children, if you don't give them challenges, they stop taking challenges. So whatever they're like, even if they are advanced learners, they will not take those challenges, and that will ruin them. Offer training in gifted education to all the teachers. As I said, training to teachers are very important. Now, don't get confused between high achievers and high ability students. Now, high achiever students are those who study hard, who are very hardworking. They are intelligent, but they're very hardworking. They work hard and then they get the marks. And here the norms at all, who may, distract you, but they are very intelligent. They will ask you very intellectual questions. They love challenges. So there is a difference between high achievers and high ability. High ability students need not study a lot, but still may get good marks. But high achievers are the ones who study, work hard, and then get the marks. Don't assume that all advanced learners are the same and that one strategy works for all. This we often do, many advanced learners, there are two different, like, according to me, some advanced learners, they don't like, doing physical activities, but some advanced learners, they are very hyperactive. They love doing physical activities. They may finish their work and then, they may, disturb the class. So you can give them a lot of physical activities. Why don't you go and do, send them out of the class, do certain work that you have to get it done. Or there are certain advanced learners who do not like going out, who are not very aesthetic types. They don't like doing physical activities. Why don't you ask them to, why don't you ask them to do certain things, just do a research? Or why don't you ask them to go to, give them an extra question and ask them to find the answer for it? So that really helps them, they feel happy about it. Don't confuse extension activities with additional work. See, most of the time we think, okay, now this is an advanced learner, so what we'll do is he's finished his work, chalo, the teacher starts using them in a different way. Go and help that child, or go run, get that book. This isn't an extension of activity. They're like, this is just an work that they do which they may not enjoy, so that and this may create a lot of ruckus in the class. So instead of that, you give them an extension activity, you give them a higher level work, so they feel happy about it, and that challenges them. Don't give them too many instructions. They don't like, being given instructions, because they are very intelligent. They can immediately understand what is need to be done. And that becomes the moment you give them too many instructions, they lose interest and they don't work. And you'll see most of the time their books are incomplete because too many instructions given. You have to do this and you have to write the question and then it keeps, that irritates them. So don't give them too many instructions. Give them the freedom to work that they want to work. And I would like to conclude by saying that, most of the time it's not a challenge that because of it's not the students that is a challenge. It is our thought process which is a challenge. You know, the way we think, it's that stereotype thinking that is a challenge. The moment we accept people the way they are, the moment we want them or accept them the way they are, I'm sure you can find more strategies than what I have explained or what I have shared with you, because it's, after all, every individual is different and every individual has got their own strategies and own way of being dealt with. So it is just one thing that you have to do, is we have to accept and build rapport. So let us be somebody who makes everybody feels like somebody, and as teachers we really have to feel this. Thank you.
Thank you, Parubita. It was a wonderful lecture. You have talked about the strategies in dealing with both the slow learners and advanced learners. It was so very explicitly explained that we now have a very good idea as to how to deal with them. Of course, with years of experience, we have also been experimenting with these methods. I'm sure we have also adopted certain methods, but you have put them so, so coherently and so systematically that this will definitely help us in being better teachers in the classroom. Thank you, Parumita. Thank you so much. Now we move on to the next, that is question answer session. But before that, I have an announcement to make. Tomorrow, again, our college is organizing a national webinar. And this is on the topic, Unleash Yourself, How to Pace with Difficult Times and Discover the Power in You. This webinar will be at 11 a.m. and I request all of you to please attend this webinar. Now I would ask Mrs. Vijay Lakshmi to take up the question answer session. Mrs. Vijay Lakshmi.
Thank you, ma'am. There is a flurry of questions all across. I mean, it's just too many. Considering that we had such an enriching session, the Telegram group has been bombarded with questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick and choose a few relevant questions so that we can cover as many facets as possible. A common recurring question across the thread, a lot of people have asked, we've received questions from Dr. Kishore Bhanushali, Sujata Agarwal, Madam Amanda Alvin. All of them have a common point. There is a lack of time and it is very difficult for teachers to actually incorporate every child's needs, given that there's such a lot of diversity in student groups. So how do we deal with large class and yet keep in mind the sensitive needs of slow learners and advanced learners? Can any of the speakers take it up? Who would like to go about it?
Should I?
Yeah, sure.
In my school, as I said, we have big classes, and what our teachers do is they take remedials. They come early, 1 hour early to the school, and they take remedials for these children. And the best way that you could do is you build a rapport, just not with the child, but also with the parent. So what happens is when you build a rapport with the parents also start starts taking care of the child. So this also brings about a change in the child's behavior. So this is one of the things. Ashwini ma'am, would you like to add certain things?
Yeah, thank you, Parumita. And that was important. What I would like to add to this, what you already said, is we can also think about the concept of universal design of learning, or UDL, because I can totally understand that it is difficult to address each child's needs for sure, and the needs may be different. Definitely individualized attention may be needed, but what universal design of learning means that it is possible that sometimes some of the teaching learning strategies which are followed may benefit all learners. Right. And there are multiple strategies which will benefit all learners. In addition to that, differentiated instruction may be there for certain learners. So most of the 70% of the or 80% of the teaching learning process can be in universal design of learning. In a practical way, if I have to talk about it, is having multiple means of expression that is for the student, how to express himself, having multiple means of representations, like Parubita already talked about, audio, visual, I mean a combination of everything, and multiple means of engaging the student, like developing an interest, motivation, and all that in different ways. So most of the learners may identify to this at some point or the other, and that is why it is universal, and this is what which will help in inclusion and also address the time barrier to some extent. Definitely respect the time barrier, and in addition to having these multiple means of inputs, processing, and outputs, we can have some differentiated instruction based on the individual learner, but it will not be then totally for that learner, because that is again will not fit into the inclusion and also in the practical part, but we, to top that, we can use some individualized instructions. I hope that was
yes, ma'am. We understand. I mean, we need to do whatever we can despite the time shortage. Like Paramita ma'am suggested, coming early or changing the pedagogy that we use can actually enhance and cater to the diverse needs.
Yeah, and I think we need to do that for all the learners, and then the learners with difficulty will also benefit. That's what I also mean. That it is not only for an individual learner. If we have some strategies which are, I mean, research shows that some strategies of these multisensory methods, multiple means of outputs, benefit all the learners. It's not only about one learner, and then there can be additional differential strategies. So this will take care of the time gap constraint to some extent.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from a participant by name Suman. What are the formal identification tests that can be used for identifying intellectually backward or borderline students?
Should I take that?
Yes, ma'am.
Paramita?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead, ma'am.
So I think when the question is about formal identification test, first thing is to identify or to get to know why the formal identification test is needed. If it is for providing support, or it is for providing some formal diagnosis for certification purposes, maybe that is a time we need a formal identification test. Then, considering that a formal diagnosis is needed, then the identification tests start after history or checking the child and taking a history from the parents, teachers. Then the identification test after that is hearing and vision assessment. A formal IQ assessment may be done if one needs to do it for a formal identification. Then a standardized and validated IQ assessment is done. After the IQ assessment, based on the ranges of IQ assessment, there is formal educational assessment, which will depend on the academic, curriculum, and there are formal tests to do that. Based on the formal, these combined is known as psychometric assessment. And so which includes IQ and formal educational assessment, and that will give us two things. One thing is about the diagnosis based on the intellectual ranges, and the other things, the educational assessment will give us the diagnosis and will also tell about the strengths and challenges. These are academic areas which a learner is performing fine. These are academic areas which are difficult. So this is what is formal identification, the IQ and educational. But again, like just ending this with a point that just to identify slow borderline intellectual functioning or slow learners, as we are addressing them, and we shouldn't, and advanced learner, that for just to identify them, to give them support in a educational institution, IQ assessment is not the only thing or not the answer. It may be needed for certain other purposes.
Ma'am, based on the same question, there's another line of questions that have come. Shouldn't assessment of academically backward students or advanced or gifted students be made a part of the regular curriculum itself so that the teachers can cater to their needs?
Definitely. And I think we are talking about CCE, right? Continuous and comprehensive assessment. Yes. And that is the norm which is followed by the government, by education systems also, and it does make a lot of sense, because like we talked before, just like an IQ score is not an answer, we already talked that one single test or one single score is not the answer. Any performance to be evaluated or to be thought about going in whatever direction, there needs to be a range, or there needs to be consistency, and that, so continuous evaluation throughout the year and comprehensive evaluation, that is not only academics but also co-curricular and other challenges. So that is definitely a very good point, and I'm so happy we have brought it up.
But I would also like to differ here. You know, many a times these tests also leads to a lot of branding in the class. So
that would be my next question, ma'am. What about the partiality and favoritism?
Yeah, so I would say that, you know, it should not be made compulsion. I would say that only when it is required. Like, we don't go and have paracetamol every day, or we don't go and get a blood test every day done, right? So the same way, when it is required, we need to do it. The moment, you know, the teacher in the class gets to know that, you know, this child is different, the child is somehow treated differently. So it is better, I would say that it is better not to get into a test, a formal test, a psychometric test, until and unless it really becomes difficult for the child.
So I think what you're saying, Paromita, and I agree that formal IQ test should not be there, definitely. Other thing, what you're saying is, what I understand that it will label the child, but when I talk about continuous and comprehensive assessment, it doesn't reflect informal class assessments into marks. So there is a thing in our mind that test means marks, and I actually talked about it while during my presentation too. Why should a test only reflect into marks? There can be a continuous assessment, and continuous assessment is not only test; it is also observation, it is also portfolios, right? It is also oral discussions, and it doesn't reflect into marks. It gives an idea to the teacher over a continuous period of time of what the person can do, and what the child or individual can do, and what he can do better. And it is for holistic development. It is not, so because it is not only academic, it's not only marks. In fact, even in co-curricular activities, there need not be pass or fail or win or lose, but in a different spirit for sure.
Yeah, but then again, I have another, I would like to differ there. Another thing that, you know, we talk about, you know, we'll not consider the marks, and we'll have, you know, we keep doing that. But, you know, somewhere we Indians, we follow the marks. We want, you know, we want that result. We want those marks oriented results. You know, someone getting 80%, like, wow. Someone getting 40% may have more knowledge, but we don't consider. So, like, again, you know, how much ever we try to, you know, tell, or, you know, we try to, sanitize the teachers, or tell them that marks are not important, or even the, you know, other whole system, but still it's the same system. I understand, like, I would love this kind of a system, but that doesn't happen in practical, right?
True. I think we have to drive towards a balance between catering to their needs and yet not labeling them, and, you know, making it obvious that, you know, we have a separate strategy for them. Stemming upon the same thing, couple of questions that have come is, how do we motivate students who have some kind of learning disabilities, or who are in the slow category? And contrary to that, how do we keep the advanced students grounded and not, you know, create an ego situation?
Paromita, I think, talked about it, but do you want to go into it again?
Okay, firstly is motivating. We all have to know that it's just not the academics, you know, that we have to consider. We have to consider the holistic, like, you know, the overall performance of the child. So many of the slow learners I have seen, or children with learning disability, has got many good qualities. They may be very good with art, they may be very good with dance, they could be very good with music. So you encourage them for these activities. It's just not academics, it's also the other activities that are, you know, that are to be used. So, you know, motivate them in that way. Try to include them in this class, you know, as I said, while you're having a discussion, get them into the discussion. What do you think? Give them that importance. At the same time, with a child who's an advanced learner, try to show them their weakness, or try not to, you know, use phrases like, wow, you've done a wonderful job, or something. Just say, wow, yeah, that you have done this work, you need not do it further, or, you know, but many a times, you know, as teachers, we also get irritated with these advanced learners. We often get very irritated because, you know, they are very critical, they monopolize, they irritate.
They have too many questions, and they disrupt the class.
And, you know, what we do as teachers, we try to insult them, we try to humiliate them, because we know that they know better than us. So at the same time, we have to be really careful not to humiliate them, but at the same time to keep them grounded.
Vijay Lakshmi.
Yes, ma'am.
I think we'll have this as the last question. The
Okay.
rest of the questions maybe can be mailed to them and they can answer.
Yeah,
and
there are too many
Yeah.
questions. I don't
Yes,
think we
now
can cover.
the time is already up.
Yeah.
So we'll take the questions through mails or through Telegram group, and maybe we will send it to our resource persons who can send the answers.
Yeah.
Maybe the last question.
Let me take the last question from Huma Siddiqui. She says, how can we deal with parents who are not ready to accept that the child is in need of special attention?
We face this I face it every time because it's very difficult. As I was telling Ashwini ma'am, it's very difficult for parents to accept. As I said, we as teachers also, or everyone, acceptance is very important. And many of the time, parents do not accept. Like for example, in my school, there is a child who has got severe learning disability, and whenever I ask the parents to get him tested, they're just not ready, and they keep telling me, "Mera bacha pagal nahi hai." And not alone that, they stopped coming to me now. Like the moment they see me, they change their route. So it's very difficult to convince. So we as counselors, we take a lot of sessions. We go for home visits. We observe the child. We talk to the parents. We somehow try to convince. But yes, there like 90% of the time it's a success. But 10% there is a failure, because it's very difficult to accept the fact that your child has got some disability. But then as time passes by, like as the child goes to the higher class, and when the parents really start facing the problem, they accept it eventually. But in the beginning, it is very difficult.
Yeah, and even I think, like, just to add to what Paramita is saying, that parents are burdened with expectations. They may the expectations of their own self, of the society, of the educational institutions, and so many expectations, and they can't sort of, it takes time for them to bridge the gap between these expectations and abilities. So it is not a single line answer, and it is not a single process. It will take a long time, but definitely it will be our role to help the parents see that just like any individual or any child, each child will also have his strengths as well as difficulties. So sometimes because of this burden of expectations, the difficulties become a lot, and we sort of start going only on the difficulties, and the strengths remain away. So it will be a good idea to help the parents. I mean, the parents have to know this for themselves. So when we talk about counseling, is also, it's not us giving advice, but helping the parents to figure out that the child has strengths too, and in addition to difficulties, and that can be balance the strengths also, and with everyone's support, the difficulties can be addressed with all that.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ashwini and Mrs. Parumita Chakraborty. We had a very, very fruitful session. Actually, you have put up the kind of, how to identify a slow and advanced learner, and also how to adopt strategies to help them. It was a very, very complete kind of session we had. I think it was very enriching for us. Now we go to the last end of the program. But before we go to the end of the program with the vote of thanks, I would like to make one announcement. And again, the feedback form has been already shared in the Telegram group. Please fill the feedback form if you want a certificate. And secondly, we all hope to see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock for our next webinar, which is on Unleash Yourself, how to face your difficult times and discover the power in you. The link to this has been shared in this Telegram group. That is the Telegram group of this webinar. You can get the link there. You can enroll yourself, and we hope to see all of you again tomorrow. So now I move on to Mr. Nilesh Matre to convey the vote of thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madhumita madam. Good evening, one and all. Every child has a different learning style and pace. Each child is unique, not only capable of learning, but also capable of succeeding. On this note, let's conclude a remarkable, knowledgeable national level webinar on learner differences and different learning needs. I take the opportunity to propose formal vote of thanks. We place on record our sincere gratitude to today's first resource person, Dr. Ashwini Marathe ma'am, for sharing her wonderful knowledge. Ma'am has discussed various types of learners differences, different learning disabilities, identification of slow and advanced learners. Thank you, madam, for excellent presentation and making this webinar interesting and meaningful. We would like to express our sincere thanks to our second resource person, Mrs. Parumita Chakraborty ma'am, for your very interesting and thought-provoking session, wherein ma'am discussed various challenges faced by teachers, do's and don'ts, and strategies to be adopted in classroom while dealing with different kind of students. We are very much thankful to our trustee and management members for their generous support and encouragement to organize this national level webinar. Special thanks are due to Dr. S. Kumadavali, Director, SPRJ Kanyashala Trust, for their timely guidance and encouragement. My regards are due to our principal, Dr. Asha Menon ma'am, for motivating and mentoring us to organize such events. By organizing a couple of webinars and a 3 days conference with Mukta, now we are having a very good bonding with them. So our thanks are due to Mukta, especially to the Arthavale sir and their team for providing the platform and technical support along with a strong partnership to make this virtual event successful. We would like to express our sincere thanks to the IQSC team for their enormous efforts to get this national level webinar executed successfully. I acknowledge the unwavering support received from all HODs, all the vice principals, the faculty and staff members. My thanks are also go to all the people who have given their precious time in organizing this event. In particular, I would like to acknowledge and thank Professor Suchita, Professor Swati, Ms. Hashmat for being supportive from designing the registration form, feedback form, brochure, certificates, and all the publicity part of this virtual event, and for their technical support. Last but not least, thanks to all the participants who took out their time and made this webinar a grand success. The endless list of questions is itself pointing that our participants are very enthusiastic. And I'm sure that you all must have benefited by attending this webinar. Thank you very much. Over to Madhumita ma'am.
Thank you. We had a wonderful session today. So we call off and we thank you for participating in this webinar. Thank you so much.
Please stop live streaming.
Okay.